Picture this. You're a child, somewhere in the range of 8 to 12 years old. After months of scraping together your meager allowance, birthday money, and whatever cash you could pull from doing odd jobs, you finally saved up enough cash to buy a brand new game. This is a huge moment for you. You've had to suppress that voice in the back of your head telling you to blow your wad of cash on Yu-Gi-Oh cards. You've gone without candy or extra tokens at the arcade, but the effort was not in vain. With that little chunk of change in your pocket, you head to your local game store where you're faced with the greatest obstacle in your quest for fun. What game do I pick anyway? If you were like me and didn't have a large disposable income as a child, you might remember how big of a deal that decision was. I mean, sure, you might have 1 or 2 games already in mind when you got to the store, but not always. I grew up at the tail end of the era before the internet was a reliable and ubiquitous source of information, and what was there wasn't necessarily even accessible by a kid like me. Search engines weren't nearly as reliable as they are now, so if you wanted information on what games were coming out when, you had to rely on word of mouth from your friends, rumors on anonymous forums, and if you were really lucky, a paper magazine subscription. What all that boils down to is that picking a game at GameStop was a humongous risk. I could maybe scrape together enough cash to buy 1 or 2 new games a year, so I had to make my picks count. This is how I actually got into retro game collecting. Back then, people had no clue how much an old Nintendo game was worth, so I realized pretty quick I could buy several Super Nintendo games for the price of a single new Wii game. However, I was not totally without options. This sort of situation teaches a man something, and what I learned was brand loyalty. Call me a dumb kid who falls for corporate marketing all you want, but when I was a kid picking out a new game, spin-offs were my saving grace. Always offered me a sense of security when picking out a new title. I mean, I like Mario, so why wouldn't I like Mario when he's driving a car or punching Link in the face? Not to be too much of an old man who constantly says the past was better, but I do look at today's gaming landscape and I have to wonder, are spin-offs dead? Let's talk about it. Spin-offs are not something new. Depending on how you want to qualify what counts as a spin-off, you could even argue that spin-offs have been around for almost as long as fiction has existed. Honestly, they just make a lot of logical sense from both the consumer standpoint and the corporate standpoint. Obviously, for the company, it's a simple way to get more cash. I do say simple, not easy. While the idea of slapping a recognizable brand on a new game is really easy to understand, doing it right will actually take a level of, skill and competence. For the customer, a spin-off is simply more content with the character or franchise you're already invested in. I mean, sweet, a GBA Kingdom Hearts game? This will surely be a fun distraction to tide me over until the next mainline game comes out. I'm sure it won't be absolutely necessary to understanding the plot of the series. I grew up with countless spin-offs. Some of my favorite games are actually spin-off titles. That's not even an exaggeration. Mario Super Sluggers is my favorite sports game. Fallout New Vegas, while playing identical to the main series, is technically speaking a spin-off, and it's the best game in the franchise. Paper Mario and the Thousand Year Door is literally my all-time favorite game that isn't Pokemon. Yes, that is 2 Mario references. Yes, you will see more of him. He's great, these games are great, and I played a lot of Mario games when I was a kid. Why? Because spin-offs. As mentioned earlier, a good spin-off does more than just slap a recognizable character on a game. Most obviously, the game has to first be good. This is the real area that Mario shines. Throughout all of his many iterations, Mario has almost always been headlining a game that was fun. I think that's why he's so good at spinning off. I mean, Mario himself is technically already a spin-off of Donkey Kong. Jokes aside, whether it's racing a cart, performing dubious medical procedures, playing every sport known to man, representing the Mushroom Kingdom at the Olympic Games against Sonic the Hedgehog, or just having a party, Mario shows us the key to a good spin-off title is having fun. I know I am something of a Nintendo shill, but having played so many of these games, it legitimately feels like they were made by people who thought, you know what would be fun? And then they just did that. There's a level of cheer that comes through in these spin-offs that you don't always get if you're playing a standalone game, and I think that comes from the games being made by devs who are interested in trying new projects and styles. Sometimes the devs even end up making new, highly popular franchises with their spin-offs. I mean, few people even remember SimCity, but just about everyone is familiar with The Sims. In addition to gameplay experimentation, spin-off games have always been a great opportunity for expanding the world and characters of a franchise, telling stories you might not otherwise get to tell. Some of gaming's biggest icons owe their existence to spin-off titles. Many already know that Waluigi only exists because Wario needed a doubles partner for Mario Tennis. What would we do without the 8 billion hours of Waluigi-related oddities on the internet? It of course goes beyond just Waluigi. The original Sidekick owes a lot of his characterization to spin-off games, and the Super Mario Bros. Super Show, but in the games, a lot of it comes from Luigi's Mansion, as well as some really popular side characters like King Boo or Professor Egat. Wario owes a lot of his greater characterization to things like the WarioWare and Wario Land series, and Yoshi became a symbol of cute and cuddly gaming due to games like Yoshi's Island and Yoshi's Story. Sometimes it isn't even about fleshing out a specific game's world or story. A spin-off offers the ability to take something a bit familiar and do something radically different, creating something magically new in the process. The Shin Megami Tensei series remains very popular in general, but I think at this point the general public is more likely to recognize a creature like Jack Frost from Persona. Heck, I'm one of those gamers. I've been trying to avoid mentioning Pokemon too much at this stage of the video, as there will be plenty of opportunity to talk about that later, but Pokemon spin-offs are the king of new directions for the franchise that push the boundaries of what came before. Pokemon Colosseum, to use one example, is still wildly popular with the fanbase for being a Pokemon game that actually shows a somewhat seedy, grimy underbelly to the Pokemon world. Pokemon Mystery Dungeon took the basic concept of a Pokemon game where you play as the Pokemon and created moments that bring some people to tears to this very day. Officially speaking, the Legends games are main series Pokemon titles, but they're also clearly spin-offs, given the radical difference in gameplay and story. And they were considered some of the best Pokemon experiences in the entire franchise, with intense moments we never could have seen coming. Sometimes a spin-off is so important to both gameplay and lore that it ends up totally dominating the series, overtaking the original completely. Let me ask you one question. When was the last time you heard the word Warcraft when it wasn't at the end of World of? I'm sure some really old school gamers are going to be angry at me for this statement, but seriously, no one really cares about the original Warcraft at this point. While not the first, WoW absolutely dominated the MMORPG market. It's the poster child of the genre. I'm not up on the lore, but I know from people that are that WoW has elevated that lore in many exciting ways. For another example, when was the last time you heard the words Metal Gear when it wasn't followed by the word Solid? That's another game franchise that people don't even remember the originals of. For one more example that's a bit more modern, does anyone remember Titanfall from 2014? I know some will, but you know what's even more famous now? Apex Legends, which, along with making Star Wars games for Disney, seems to be the only thing that company is interested in making anymore. Now that I've gushed about how much I love spin-off games and their place in gaming history for a while, let me address the question that I asked at the top of the video. Are spin-offs dead? Well, no. We do get them, especially from the franchises that are famous for their spin-offs, like Mario. However, I want to talk about a trend that I've noticed with spin-offs in recent years. I couldn't really give you a hard date that this really started, but it seems to me that there has been a kind of widespread change on how spin-off titles are being made that I find concerning, for lack of a better word. It feels like we've hit a period of stagnation with our spin-offs, where once they were areas of experimentation, both from a gameplay and storytelling perspective, spin-offs these days feel kind of one note and empty. This isn't just me being an old man who hates change either. I have evidence to back up my claim. Let's take a look at one of these spin-off kings, Pokemon. Sorry non-Pokemon fans, I'm gonna have to go on kind of an extended tangent to make my point. Cerebi, the best Pokemon website, keeps a handy list of all Pokemon games, arranged by the generation they were released in. Here is a list of Generation 3 Pokemon games, which was the generation of my childhood. For the non-Pokemon fans, this period starts in November of 2002, when Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire released in Japan, and it ends in September of 2006, when Pokemon Diamond and Pearl came out, which started the 4th generation of Pokemon games. Cerebi lists 16 games under this umbrella, but to be fair, we can't really count all of them. Ruby, Sapphire, Emerald, Fire Red, and Leaf Green are all main series, so they aren't really relevant to our discussion here. The e-reader was a peripheral that worked with more than just Pokemon games, so we can throw that out along with the Pokemon Box RS, because it's not really a game. I'll also throw out the Pikachu DS tech demo from E3 2004 because that wasn't really available to the general public, and that leaves us with 10 separate spin-offs released in a 4-year period. We can slim this down further to be as fair as possible to other generations, and we can knock off Pokemate and the Pokepark Fishing Rally, as one was a pre-smartphone era mobile game, and the other was a DS download play title that you could only get if you went to a few special events, and neither of these two things were released outside of Asia. Which puts us at 8 titles, nearly all of which are pretty well regarded. This list has Pokemon Colosseum and XD, often considered among the best GameCube titles. We also have Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Red and Blue Rescue Teams. The Mystery Dungeon games are extremely well liked for their touching story moments and unique gameplay. You even have Pokemon Ranger on this list, which, while probably not as popular as the previously mentioned titles, was popular enough to warrant an anime movie and 2 sequels down the line. Now let's take a look at the most recently completed generation, Generation 8. Even though we're coming up on the end of Generation 9, likely next year, we're still technically in the middle of it, so I don't think it would really be fair to list it here. Generation 8 started with Sword and Shield, which was released in November of 2019, and ended with the release of Scarlet and Violet in November of 2022. There are 12 games listed under Cerebi's header for Generation 8, which is already less than Gen 3, but it was shorter than that generation by a year, so I won't hold that against it. However, we do still have to slim that number down. Sword, Shield, Brilliant Diamond, Shining Pearl, and Legends Arceus are all main series games. For the sake of steel manning the case for this generation, I will count Legends Arceus as a spin-off, but I do have to cut out the others, which will bring us down to 10 titles. We'll also cut out Pokemon Home for the same reason I cut out Pokemon Box RS. It's not really a game. This list also contains Pokemon Go, which came out during Generation 6 or 7, depending on where you want to draw that dividing line, but I'm still going to count Go. Again, I want to give the best possible case for Gen 8, and because it received regular updates throughout the entirety of Generation 8's lifespan. This leaves us with 9 titles, which is one more than Gen 3, but I want you to pay attention to this list as I read them off, because something may pop out to you. Pokemon Legends Arceus, Pokemon Go, Pokemon Masters EX, Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Rescue Team DX, Pokemon Smile, Pokemon Cafe Mix, New Pokemon Snap, Pokemon Unite, Pokemon TCG Live. Did you notice anything about that list? The biggest issue that I take with that is the fact that over half of them are mobile games. Go, Masters EX, Smile, and Cafe Mix are all mobile-only games, and Unite is a hybrid between mobile and Switch. That's 55.55% of all spin-offs being mobile games.
You got games on your phone?
Now, I'm not going to completely hate on mobile games. While I don't enjoy them very much, I can definitely see the appeal some might have for them. And I can give a little bit of credit for Masters EX just for fleshing out some side characters that the main series never really got a chance to. And give some credit to Go for just being the impressive technical marvel that its very existence is. However, it's kind of hard for me to classify them the same as I do a full console game, or even compare them to a full game on a handheld console. These experiences just aren't the kind that usually suck people in for hours like a truly good spin-off can do. They can be fun, but you've got a hard case to make if you want to argue that they're as good as a full console game experience. The problem isn't even that so many are mobile games. I mean, let's look at the other games on that list. They also have a bit of a problem. PCG Live is simply an online client to play the trading card game with. It's something any trading card game worth its salt is going to have. And it's just taking a separate game that already exists and putting it on the internet. Pokemon Mystery Dungeon DX is a wonderful game with great graphics and a story that I already played through back in 2005. It's a remake of a spin-off instead of just being a new spin-off. It's a good remake, but it's hardly as original or game-changing or impactful as Mystery Dungeon was when it came out in Generation 3. That leaves us with new Pokemon Snap and Legends Arceus for games that really push the Pokemon world in new gameplay or lore directions like a good spin-off should. And they do it incredibly well. These games are absolutely amazing. New Pokemon Snap is admittedly a sequel to another spin-off from the N64, so it isn't doing much new in the gameplay department, but it does offer you the opportunity to see Pokemon in the wild like never before, making the world seem more alive and these creatures more real. Generation 3 gave us multiple spin-offs that were so good they became their own spin-off series. They added new layers of whimsy and wonder to the world of Pokemon. They were imaginative and unique. They were the kinds of games that you might have bought because they had the Pokemon branding on them, but you stayed for the excitement and new adventures they had to offer. In comparison, the new generations have a bunch of mobile games that you can download and, I don't know, kill some time on your morning commute, give you something to do in the break room other than talk to your coworkers. There is still absolute gold coming out of the true spin-offs the franchise gives us, but the quantity of that gold has slowed down, like a mine that is slowly being depleted. Do you see what I mean when I say we've entered an era of spin-off stagnation? Game companies just aren't really using them to tread new paths in terms of gameplay and lore, at least not nearly as much as they used to. I know that I'm risking coming across as simultaneously an old man saying things were better back in my day, and an entitled child complaining that he's not getting nearly as many toys as he wants to, but I love games, I love stories, and I feel like gaming is at its best when you have a lot of developers who are constantly making new and interesting things, innovating on the things we love in new ways. The problem isn't just Pokemon either. Mario, for example, has, by my count, 2 spin-offs in the past 5 years that aren't some form of a sequel to an already established Mario spin-off. These being Princess Peach Showtime and Mario Bros. 35. That's more debatable, I will admit. I did only do a cursory glance at the Mario catalog when writing this, and they're still doing fun things with those established spin-off titles on a fairly regular basis, but the number is definitely down overall. Persona is still doing fun things like Strikers and Tactica, but they've also recently put out a mobile gacha game and have spent more times on remakes recently. There are definitely reasons for this phenomenon of less spin-off titles. The rise of mobile gaming is obviously a big one. It's definitely a cash cow, and I can hardly fault a company for wanting to release products that make the most financial sense. With the big-name spin-off kings like Mario or Pokemon, you also have the problem of the spin-offs becoming their own series. They're almost too popular for their own good. Why waste time making a totally new and innovative Mario game when the fans are clamoring for a new Mario Kart or Mario Party game? There's only so many resources going around at even the bigger companies that I can understand focusing attention elsewhere. Another big issue that's affecting spin-off titles is the remake epidemic that's been dominating the market for years now. Remakes have been part of gaming for decades now, but we've definitely had a major uptick in them in recent years. Everything from Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion to House of the Dead 2 are getting remakes these days. From the corporate perspective again, why make a new game when the fans are excited to return to what you've done before? Financial incentives explain most things that the big companies do, and even if the devs on the teams care about doing new interesting things, they have to collect a paycheck just like everyone else. Ultimately, at the end of the day, the markets are what the markets are, and you can't really change them. Game companies will continue to make games that make the most sense to them, and I know I'm still going to get at least some great titles down the line. I just wish that the game devs had the opportunity to really explore what they could do with the franchises that they're working on. That's certainly how it seemed like it worked when I was a kid, even if that's probably not entirely accurate. A good game can make you come back for more. It makes gamers willing to take a risk on a weird and different direction and discovers new fun that they never knew was available. Let me know what your thoughts are. Am I just a washed up old man complaining about the state of modern gaming, or have you really lost something over the years? Anyway, thanks for watching, subscribe to the channel. I'm Landon, this is Landon-Core, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.